Oh boy. Florida State, man, I feel so bad for y'all. The ACC has voted this morning to add three schools: Cal, Stanford, and SMU. This is going to be very interesting to see how this shakes out. We spent the last few weeks of the offseason with sort of a Florida State soap opera involving the ACC and their loud mouthing and belly aching about wanting to get out. And the way this thing went down in the ACC with adding these three teams is pretty interesting. Um, there's 15 teams in the ACC. Now there's 14 in football. And then plus Notre Dame. Notre Dame is in the ACC and in a bunch of other sports fully. They're not fully in the ACC in football, but they get a vote on all of these things. So there were 15 teams that had to vote on this ACC expansion of Cal, Stanford, and SMU. And the way the ACC works, 12 of the 15 have to vote in favor of expansion or adding a particular team in order for that vote to go through. Over the last week or so, as the Cal, Stanford, and SMU talk has kind of picked up steam, it's been pretty widely reported and pretty widely known that there were four teams in the ACC standing in the way. You only need, which is how many you need. You need four to block expansion, because you need 12 of the 15 to vote for yes. That means you can only have 3 no votes. Any more than 3 no votes, and you would not have expansion. The four teams were Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and NC State. And all four of those schools had publicly voiced their opposition to adding those 3 schools. Well, sort of out of the blue yesterday, they had meetings, and this morning they voted, and 12 of the 15 teams voted yes to add them. So one of those 4 teams that was a no vote, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, or NC State, one of those 4 teams flipped their no vote to a yes vote and decided to add those 3 teams. So it looks like the ACC is going to be expanding by 3 teams. So in football, they're going to go from 14 to 17 teams plus half Notre Dame. Notre Dame has to play 5 ACC games a year, but they're not technically in the ACC. Other sports, they are, but so they're going from 14 to 17 in football, 14 to 18 in the other sports. And which school do you think switched their vote? I'm pretty sure it wasn't Florida State. Pretty sure it wasn't Clemson. I don't think it was North Carolina. It sounds like it might have been NC State that flipped their vote from no to yes, opening the door for Cal, Stanford, and SMU. So 12 of the 15 schools voted yes. So how is this going to work? Well, we'll start with SMU. SMU has agreed to join the ACC for 0 television revenue. None. They just want the security that goes along with being in a Power 5 program. Supposedly, they have got assurances and promises from some of their more notable donors and alumni to keep the football program and the athletic department afloat financially for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it happens to be, while they will be receiving 0 TV money from the ACC. This is going to be interesting to see how this works, because you've got some schools in the ACC, Florida State, definitely, Clemson to a lesser degree, that have been very public about their inability to compete in big-time college football because of the discrepancy in TV revenue between the ACC and the SEC and Big Ten. And here you have SMU going, we'll compete for no money. Going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to the first time that SMU plays Clemson or Florida State. What if SMU beats Clemson or Florida State? Clemson and Florida State are running around going, well, we need way more money so we can compete with the Georgias and the Ohio States of the world. SMU's going, we don't need any money at all to beat Clemson and Florida State. It's just going to be funny. I don't know that this is going to change anybody's mind in the ACC, like Florida State and Clemson wanting to leave the ACC now that, now we've added 3 new teams. Now we want to stay. I don't really think this is going to change the dynamic much for those two schools in particular. It may change it for North Carolina. They're loosely tied with NC State. Uh, but so the TV contract that the ACC has with ESPN has built-in clauses that state if any teams are added to the ACC, we will give the conference X amount of dollars more per year. So when a team like SMU joins the conference, the ACC is going to get a raise financially from ESPN. But they don't have to give any of that money to SMU because SMU has agreed to play for zero TV revenue. So what that means is however much that additional revenue is going to go to the existing ACC schools. So Clemson and Florida State are going to get a raise TV revenue-wise. They're adding 3 teams. So whatever that amount is in the contract that the TV money is going to go up per year from ESPN, right? That gets added to the ACC as a whole. And now the ACC then has that much more money to divvy up amongst its schools at the end of the year in terms of TV money. Cal and Stanford, there's some mixed reporting. There was some reporting that Stanford would agree to join for zero TV revenue for a period of 2 or 3 years. Cal, I read, was at a 30%. Like they would join the ACC for 30% of what the other teams are getting. So we'll see kind of the details, I'm sure, over the next few days as the rest of this story sort of starts to trickle out. But this is interesting for a couple of different reasons. You've got the Clemson-Florida State angle. They want out of the ACC. They don't think they're making enough money. So the ACC goes out and adds teams, which means the ACC is going to get more money that it then can give to Clemson and Florida State. You've also got the fact that the ACC is reworking their postseason payment structure. They're going to reward teams that make the playoffs and higher bowl games more than they reward teams who make lower tier bowl games or no bowl games at all. So in theory, schools like Clemson and Florida State, who are likely to make major postseason bowl games or playoffs going forward, that's another area in which Clemson and Florida State will be getting more money, a raise, an increase financially from the conference versus what they're getting now. This is also interesting to me because it's happening during the season. You know, the last couple of years, we're no strangers to this realignment and expansion talk that goes around and teams moving around in the offseason. It's the first time really that it's happened during the season. I'm not completely surprised, though, considering who it happened to, right? The Pac-12 schools. Because the Pac-12 is, for all intents and purposes, dead the minute basketball season ends in March or April, whenever it is. They got 4 teams left next year, right? Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State. What's going to happen with Oregon State and Washington State? Probably going to get swallowed now by the Mountain West. Oregon State and Washington State are probably going to get swallowed up by the Mountain West would be my guess on what's going to happen there. But anyway, I don't expect Florida State or Clemson to look at this and go, "Oh, okay, now we're good. We'll shut up and stop crying constantly now." They're going to continue to cry and complain. What'll be funny too is a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, when Clemson and Florida State, of course, are still in the ACC because the grant of rights, they can't get out. Every single time they lose a game, you know what the fans are going to say? Well, it's because of TV money. I can't wait for that. It's going to be interesting. We'll see how the travel works out, the scheduling. It does seem odd to me. The Big Ten adding the West Coast schools was a little odd. They just when they at first just added the 2 of them, but then they added 2 more. So now there's 4 Big Ten schools along the West Coast. So at least those West Coast schools, in theory, get some regional travel there. Now they're still going to have to go east to play road games against your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Purdue's, your Penn State, stuff like that. But they at least have those 4 schools sort of lumped together out west that can kind of, do a travel thing. I don't know how this is going to work in the ACC. You got SMU. Well, you got the ACC, which is all up and down the East Coast. You got Stanford and Cal, which is as far away as you can get geographically within the continental United States on the East Coast in California. And then you got SMU dead in the middle. I don't know. So, I guess they're going to, so say North Carolina, right? Some random season. On the road at SMU. Well, you might as well the following week just play on the road at Cal. You fly to Texas, You play SMU, you stay in Texas for a day or two after the game, fly on out to California, play your game there. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. A lot of cross-country travel here for the ACC, adding these two West Coast schools. But look, I really think the travel thing is overblown. I've talked about this before. This isn't the 1970s. We're not taking horse and buggy to games anymore. These players are flying what basically amounts to a private flight. It's a public flight. Technically, they're flying Delta or United Airlines or whatever, but it's chartered planes. They're not going through TSA. They're not waiting at security. You know, they're not getting their, they're not on the thing weighing their luggage. I mean, none of that shit. You know, they get driven out to the tarmac to get on the plane. They take off. I don't really, Miami Hurricanes have been traveling to Pitt and Boston College for how long? I mean, what kind of a trip do you think that is? The Arizona schools traveling to play Oregon and Washington State. How far of a trip do you think that is? West Virginia traveling to play Texas Tech, TCU, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, the travel thing's a little overblown. Now, I get there's a time difference issue here, East Coast to West Coast to East Coast, but I think that can be negated through kickoff times, right? So okay, so you don't want to make an East Coast team travel to the West Coast and play what would be a primetime West Coast game. For example, you don't want to take Clemson, fly them to Cal, and make them play at 8 Pacific, which would be 11 Eastern. So like your Clemson's internal body clock, they're kicking off at 11 o'clock at night. I don't think that's going to happen. When Clemson travels to Cal to play, whether it's Cal or Stanford, the game will be, noon Pacific, which would be 3 Eastern, or 3:30, 4:30 Pacific, which would be 7:30 Eastern. They're not going to have, so just get that idea out of your head, because what it is you got a lot of ACC fans that got the whole Pac-12 after dark thing stuck in their head, and they're like, oh, great. Clemson games aren't going to be coming on until 11 o'clock at night. Think it through. The TV networks are paying money to broadcast these games. Do you really think the TV network wants to put Clemson on at 11 o'clock Eastern, the time zone where Clemson is located? No, that's not going to happen. Clemson's going to be on at 5 Pacific, which will be 8 Eastern, or 1 Pacific, which will be 4 Eastern. So the idea that Clemson's going to be playing at 2 and 3 in the morning East Coast time, that's just not going to happen. The TV networks aren't going to allow that. No one will watch it. That's fan excuses is all that is. Now, traveling for the fans, yeah, okay, you're going to go to less games. But look, how many Clemson fans are showing up at Pitt, at Boston College? Hell, at Miami even. Some, yes, some. But even your average diehard college football fan isn't flying to games in the regular season. They're just not doing it. They're just not. So, again, if you're Clemson or Florida State, there's really not that much difference between playing on the road at Pitt and playing on the road at Cal. There's not. So I don't really want to hear the travel excuse thing. Now, the death of regionality and, college football becoming a coast-to-coast conference and stuff like that, if you want to complain about that, fine. I don't necessarily agree. It doesn't bother me, but I at least understand that complaint. But saying, well, what about the travel? Look, stop it. These people travel like kings and queens. Like I said, they're not taking horse and buggy. And any fan that's willing to get on an airplane from Tallahassee and fly to Pitt or Boston College to watch Florida State play up there is also willing to get on a plane and fly to Dallas to watch SMU or California to watch a Cal and Stanford game. So again, even the fan travel is going to be very negatively impacted. But it looks like the ACC is expanding. Cal, Stanford, and SMU. SMU, welcome back to big-time college football. SMU, man, remember them back in the 80s? The last team to get the death penalty. And they've been kind of struggling back to relevancy ever since then. What was that, 1984, I believe they got busted for all that cheating and they were doing. Program basically went away for a couple of years, been scratching their way back ever since. Have had a couple of decent seasons over the last few years. And now looks like they're going to become a Power 5 football program. So Shout out to SMU. Luckily, I already have an SMU helmet, so I don't have to go out and buy one. There we go. Shout out to the SMU Mustangs. Man, I might secretly pull for SMU. How about them Mustangs? Florida State man, Clemson man. Cry.